In Diablo 2 Resurrected, Cold Mastery has been a hot topic lately. Pun intended. Mainly it's because it's not functioning as it did in the original game, and there is a debate as to whether this is intentional or a bug. One thing I have not seen crop up in the discussion is the reality that this affects everything with minus resistances, not just Cold Mastery, and it seems to be functioning in a weird hybrid manner that can be good or bad depending on your perspective. Overall, I feel it provides a bit of power creep, especially for cold spells, but also has some odd behavior outside of that. In this video, we'll cover how minus resistances used to work, how they're working now, and what this means for a few popular builds. Let's start off with a quick summary of how resistance reduction works. If an enemy has below 100% resistance to something naturally, then it's simple math. You just subtract the reduction from the resistances. For example, an enemy with 50% resistance gets hit with minus 75% resistance. They will have a negative 25% resistance to that element. It caps at negative 100%, but usually it's just that way. This changes a bit when the enemy has over 100% or more resistance to an element, making them achieve the immunity tag, and this is where the games differ in how they handle this. In the original Diablo 2, you needed to use a spell from a specific list to break immunities. Amplify damage and Decrepify for physical, Conviction and lower resist for fire, cold, and lightning, and lower resist for poison. These functioned on a 1/5 rule, where they would reduce the target's resistances by 1/5. So if the target had 110% resistance and you reduced it by 75% with one of these skills, it would drop the target down to 95% resistance, since it would be 110 minus 15, because 15 is 1/5 of 75. After this stage, in the original version, you would have all your non-breaking reductions come into play, things such as Cold Mastery, Rainbow Facets, Death's Web, etc. They would reduce the remaining resistances at their normal rates. If the target's immunity was broken by the earlier skills, and they would have no effect on these if the resistances weren't broken. This results in true immunes and breakable immunes that would often determine who can farm where. In Diablo 2 Resurrected, we have a bit of a shift to this. Now, every reduction in resistance can serve as a breaking tool, so you can break some poison immunes simply by equipping Death's Web, even without lower resist. And you can do similar things with Cold Mastery and Cold Immunes, though Cold Mastery has no hard cap, so it can get up to insane levels that are higher than lower resist and conviction combined in some cases. Upon some testing, I have found that the order from the original remains. It just adds this additional opportunity to break resistances, and if one of the resist breaking skills breaks through first, the Mastery, Rainbow Facet, etc. function as they did in the original, at full force. So you might be asking, what does this mean for builds? It means that for a lot of builds, you actually have a lot less to fear from immunities in the late game, especially if you have good gear or skills to reduce it. It means that by far you'll see cold immunes being a significantly smaller threat outside of a select few that are extremely high immunity, since a sorceress alone will be able to break 140% immunes relatively easily, allowing her to freeze targets with a glacial spike to let her mercenary handle them, and in a team, you'll even be able to break enemies with 180% cold immunity with a high-level paladin and necromancer. This also means a poison necromancer will be able to break most immunities as well, albeit with high-end gear like Death's Web. This fortunately only means a little for the necromancer, since your alternate options to poison can stand on their own usually. But what it does change is the dynamic of the sorceress elements, making cold the only sorceress element that can stand alone and bypass a large number of immunities without endgame gear, where previously you needed dual elemental builds to handle these immune threats until you got a solid set of gear, or so builds like Blizzard Sorceress were more relegated to magic finding and some run past everything strategies, but can now actually kill or lock down a vast majority of foes that were otherwise a solid threat. Now, is this a good or bad change is the question then. There is no downside to it for the builds that benefit from it, it just makes them more flexible and objectively stronger. Since you don't get the 1/5 penalty if the resists are broken by another skill, you just gain the ability for those second wave skills to do breaking as well. And for the most part, I don't see this impacting builds too significantly outside of maybe promoting the use of Rainbow Facets a bit more. The only build that really stands out as an outlier that could potentially make this bad for build diversity is the Cold Mastery effect. This gives a distinct and obvious advantage to an already powerful set of skills, Blizzard, Ice Blast, and Glacial Spike, since it allows them to apply their freeze and chill effects and even somewhat damage far more than they used to, especially with Blizzard's high damage. It's able to punch through even at those low percents to do significant damage. Do I feel this makes dual elementals or alternate elementals bad? No, but it does reduce the extent that they are useful. I still feel, at least at endgame, the Lightning Sorceress will still outshine the Cold Sorceress as far as how reliably it can tear through many areas of the game with an Infinity Mercenary and similarly high-level gear. At first, while I was researching this behavior, I was on the fence about whether this change was good or bad, and I'm going to be honest, and the more I've looked at it, and the more I've tested it, and the more nuances I've found in it, the more gray it has become. Initially, I was leaning towards it being mostly bad. After tests, I still lean towards bad, but with a touch of could be tweaked. I think for balancing purposes, diminishing returns likely need to be put onto Cold Mastery, since at level 11 it beats maximum lower resist, and at level 27 it beats maximum conviction. At level 41, it beats them both combined. The reason for my bad rating is that it further relegates the fire tree specifically, and fire skills in general, to the sidelines late game, something that we've already done to a great extent previously. So basically, does it make the game worse? No, but does it reduce build diversity? Yes.